Thank you for joining me for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. On January the 31st, the United Kingdom formally withdrew its membership in the European Union, thus heralding a new chapter in trade and politics. In order to better understand the situation and its impact on Canada, we welcome back Christian Sivière. He is of Sol Impacts, which is a trade consultancy. Christian, thank you for joining us here today.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Tony.
So I guess the first question, I want to drill down a little bit for our audience. What is exactly Brexit, and what does that mean for the United Kingdom and for Europe?
Well, Brexit, what it means for the UK is that it truly becomes an island again. So it's isolated. It has a border with the European Union. It hasn't had a border for over 40 years. And so now it has a border, which means that when goods travel back and forth, imports or exports in both directions, there's not a border. There's a stop. You have customs formalities. You have documentation to be filed, data to be filed, checks to be done. You need to provide sanitary certificates, health certificates for food. And so a lot of additional bureaucracy, shall we say, and requirements for filing documentation and entries, resulting in higher costs.
Mm-hmm. Now, they still have trade between the countries of the European Union and the UK, but your point is that it's not completely unfettered trade. They're not part of a common market anymore.
That's right. They're out of the common market, out of what they call the single market, and so what they have with the European Union is a standard free trade agreement, a little bit like what we have with the European Union, except it's actually narrower than the one we have with the European Union because it only covers the trade in goods, and so they are no longer free and to move and import and export goods. There's these additional. They are free, but and then there's no tariffs, but there's a border, and therefore administrative requirements, which means delays and costs, which they didn't have before.
So what, in your assessment, what does this mean, I guess, for the broader picture, world trade or international trade? What is the before and what's the after?
Well, I think the UK sort of becomes a little bit isolated, is not as relevant as it used to be. I think it's free to have its own rules, but it's a little bit kind of on its own. So what has happened for the UK economy is actually there's been a reduction of investments in the UK. There's a lot of automobile assembly plants. They've invested less. They move some productions, or they intend to move some productions out of the UK. So it's a kind of a general unfortunate. I mean, Brexit is a tragedy in a way, because we, especially in our days where we have huge challenges, the pandemic, the environment, inequities, et cetera, et cetera. So we have huge challenges in the world. So it's a shame, it's a tragedy that we move away from our neighbors instead of consolidating our ties. So it has had quite an impact on the UK. Less investments has been flowing into the UK. It's been reflected in the trade figures. The January trade figures were quite amazing. In fact, I dug them out. I want to give you the exact information. Exports out of the UK in January 2021 went down by 19.3%, of which EU exports to the EU went down by 40.7%, and UK imports were down by 21%, overall imports in January, of which the EU part represented 29%, or there was a 29% reduction on imports from the EU. So it's like they have an additional, on top of the pandemic, they have an additional kind of a self-created circumstance that makes things more difficult for them economically.
We're going to continue our discussion with Christian Sivière of Sol Impex, talking about Brexit and impacts on Canadian as well as world trade. Stay with us after these messages. And we're back here, Boom and Bust. I'm your host, as always, Tony Clement, here with Christian Sivière of Sol Impex, talking about the world of Brexit and what that means for Canada. Christian, obviously, what you said just before the break indicated that, at least in the short term, trade, especially through this period of Brexit, was lessened between the UK and Europe, and I guess in a sense that's to be expected when you're putting up higher barriers and there's probably some confusion with the new rules and those kinds of things. But it's also very clear that the UK, to be successful, has to work on new trade deals. They have the freedom now to do trade deals that they couldn't do when they were part of the European Union. Is the UK working on such trade deals?
Absolutely, yes, they are, because they have no choice, and so one of the things that has happened, and which is of course is great for us in Canada, is that we have a memorandum of understanding between the UK and Canada, whereby we took the CETA free trade agreement with the EU and we transferred it on our trade to the UK. So this way, we'll be able to continue to trade with the UK with zero tariffs, with zero duties, and so that's great for us, absolutely. And indeed, aside from that, the UK has had to reach out to the countries with which the EU had a free trade agreement and work a free trade agreement of their own. So they've done it, for example, with Japan. Making more concessions actually in the process, which was kind of interesting. But yes, so they are in the process of doing that. It's a lot of work, shall we say, a lot of additional steps, but it's being done. And for us in Canada, we'll be able to continue to do business with the UK basically as usual, with some exceptions.
How, just crossed my mind now, but obviously London is a world financial center. And obviously they want to keep that role for London as being a place where trade and finances are centered. Is that at risk at all, do you see?
Yes, we've seen that happen already. We've seen a lot of activities, financial activities, moved over to the European continent. In fact, the Europeans are kind of having fun with it in a way, because they're trying to see who is going to win the contest. Sorry, who is going to win the most activities and the most transfers of jobs. I think Amsterdam and Frankfurt are pretty close to the top, and then Paris, I think, is in third. So yes, they have lost, for sure, some financial clout, some financial activities have moved to continental Europe, absolutely.
How does it impact, obviously there's a lot of talk with the Biden administration, the Trudeau government here in Canada, but also European centers and so on, about trade with Asia. Obviously the UK is part of that pivot to Asia. So do you see anything coming out of that?
Yes, that's kind of interesting, because with Asia, we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we've enjoyed for 2 years now, with Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Singapore. There's 11 countries in all, and it's a bizarre situation actually, because the Trans-Pacific Partnership for a while was led by the US, and then one of the first things Trump did when he arrived at the White House is he said the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a very bad deal, we're moving out of it. So the US have been out of that trade deal, and so amusingly the UK wants to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because of course, having left the EU, it's in bad need of stimulating trade, and So they want to join, even though they are nowhere near the Pacific, they want to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And but it's hard to tell what's going to happen now with the new administration in the U.S. because who knows? Maybe they will join the Trans-Pacific
Right.
Partnership back.
Yeah, and there's been some
So
talk of that, and so there may be a real shift and pivot to Asian trade.
yes, that's correct. That's
Well,
correct. It would be logical.
yes, exactly. Well, let's continue this discussion. Lots more to talk about. After our next break, we'll continue our discussion with Christian Sivière of Sol Impex as we're talking about Brexit, world trade. There's a lot to talk about here, so please stay with us. Talking world trade, Brexit was our start. We're moving off that a little bit, but I do want to ask you, Christian, about a special.
Yes.
There's a movement in various countries to get a special trade bloc with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, the CANZUK movement. Have you heard of that movement?
Not directly, but it's sure. I mean, it's logical. There's a few always a few new developments, and I guess at some point it might get a bit complex because we might have so many entities. China has managed to get a huge free trade deal in place. I mean, they have signed it, but it's not ratified yet. It's not in place yet. But they have this huge trade deal with Asian countries, including Japan, Australia, New Zealand. So it's going to be interesting, and it may become hard to follow at some point because there may be so many of these entities. But on our side, we have a free trade deal with the U.S., as we know, and we have one with the Pacific countries, including Japan. We have one with the European Union, and we have one with the UK. So I think we're in good shape from that point of view.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. We seem to be well placed because we've got these trade deals with all of these different blocs. Is that helping our trade situation, do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. What is not helping is that we don't take advantage of them enough. Like we're still very much focused on the US, which is quite normal. The US is next door. For most of us who live within an hour or two of the US, it represents 75% of our exports and about half of our imports. So it's a huge partner, and we're naturally putting a lot of efforts into maintaining and developing that market further. And but we should do more. We should our other free trade agreements, the CETA agreement with the European Union and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, are both underutilized. We see that from the trade figures, and so we should do more. And I think maybe we are now that we are in a more stable, we have a more stable situation in the U.S. With the change in leadership, that we'll be able to have enough stability south of the border to enable us to focus elsewhere and to diversify more. I mean, so far, when our main market was threatened by the previous administration, then we had to kind of focus on that market to maintain it at all costs. And so we weren't free to diversify as much as we are now, I think.
It's almost like the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention, because we were focused in on the Canada-U.S. trade relationship. As you're saying, a bit more stability now, but we've got a lot of trade that we can do with other parts of the world. The UK, obviously, the situation there with the vaccines, for instance, and Europe not getting vaccinated to the same rate as British citizens are now, maybe cutting off the vaccine. The UK is getting the message, well, we've got to look elsewhere than Europe if we're going to be a viable trading nation. So maybe this is a time for Canada to look outside of the US. Is that the way you're looking at it?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. We should, and we have having these trade agreements. We can look both west and east, and should indeed capitalize as much as possible on them. Absolutely.
Looking to Asia, it's obviously that something that different regions of the country look differently. Obviously, British Columbia looks to Asia all the time, but you don't get that same sense of urgency in Ontario and Quebec, or am I missing something?
You're right. BC and to I guess to a certain extent also Alberta and maybe the prairies are more looking west more than we are in Quebec and Ontario. But I think this is changing now. This is shifting and we are really looking in all directions because it's the only way to grow. It's the only way to maintain growth and maintain our activities. What is a little bit tricky currently is that because of the pandemic and other factors, there's a big upheaval in the supply chain, in the logistics networks. Like it's hard. Shipping rates are up and down, and the whole shipping logistics world is a little bit upside down. It's hard to get containers, for example, sea containers. So we have difficulties getting our hands on enough containers to be able to export our crops. So there are challenges, but everybody has the same challenges.
Sure. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum with Christian Sevier of Solimpex, talking trade, Brexit, Canada trade, you name it. Christian, something you said just before the break, it reminded me of the time pre-pandemic when we'd have these big trade missions. You know, the government of Canada, various businesses would go to, led by the Prime Minister or led by ministers, would go to a country, sign trade deals, increase trade, bilateral trade or multilateral trade. Obviously, with COVID, that isn't happening. Do you miss those days? Do you think that they were important to have these Team Canada trade missions?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I think everyone misses the personal contact, and we all know that many, in business in general, a lot of business is done on a personal basis. You have to first get to know your customer before you deal with him or her. And so, yes, we all miss that. Absolutely. And on the other hand, I think technology has enabled us to still keep in contact. So it's not the same at all, but it's still relatively efficient, shall we say. Technology makes it possible for us to keep in contact with our network, our customers, our suppliers. I think what is more difficult now, because doing this remotely, is to explore new opportunities.
Right.
Technology makes it great to keep in contact with
Sure.
our current network, and then sometimes we realize that maybe we don't need to spend so much time traveling. We can stay more at home, depending on the season or this or that. We don't need to travel that much, but. It's a challenge for new markets, for new endeavors, new clients, to find new clients, new prospects, and so we have to continue to do that as much as possible. Yes, with the tools that we have that are available to us, and realizing also that everyone is in the same boat, to a certain extent. So we're all kind of stuck with it for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, how, given the advice that you have to give at Solimpex to your clientele, are there other strategies that can be employed to gain new customers or new clientele?
Well, I think you have to, the key, I think one of the keys to strengthen your current relationships and grow from that, and grow using your current relationships to expand to new ones, and to expand to new clients, new markets, and I think that's really the key. And you have to, because there's now a lot of competition. I mean, there's competition in general, but there's like when you attend a trade show, there's competition there. There's
Sure.
other people exhibiting, and there's people visiting. Now, when you're trying to reach people on a video conference, there's also a lot of other people who are trying to do that. So I think we have to really work with our current network and work with our strength and with our connections and maximize our these opportunities that way, sort of grow from our current, because it's pretty hard to get into new markets, establishing new contacts, unless of course we have a very unique product, and it's also often a question of timing. Do we have the right product at the right time when it's in short supply elsewhere? So then of course that it becomes easy, but it's not always the case.
We've got about 20 seconds left. Are you confident that Canada can continue to increase its trade links then?
Yes, absolutely. I think we have all the elements, all the trade agreements in place, and I think we will be able to grow our business and maybe even get some new agreements with other countries. There's discussions in South America and India, I think, as well. And so I think we have great tools.
Well, lots to talk about in the future. Christian Sivière, thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, these trade relationships and changes, there's always a lot of moving parts. I'm sure Christian is right that the UK has a lot of challenges, but at the same time, they got their vaccinations a lot quicker than Europe. So I think if you ask the average British person the good trade-off, I think they'd take the vaccine any day, but we'll continue to cover the story. You can bet on that. Thank you for watching.